My grandfather sat at the head of the table, silent as bronze, listening to talk of the family company's quarterly profits. When I rose to clear plates, my stepmother followed me into the kitchen. She slapped me under the fluorescent lights. "You ungrateful thing! You'll never get that board seat." She didn't know her steel paring knife had just tapped the live mic pinned inside my shirt, and my grandfather, silent all dinner, heard everything. "My name is Marin Hale, and I am 29 years old. Tonight, I am trapped in the suffocating warmth of the Grayford Lodge, the Hale family's weekend fortress in New Shore. The air in the great room smells of old money, a mix of curing pine, beeswax, and the faint, sweet decay of leather-bound books that are never read. The dining table is a single, polished slab of mahogany that seats 20. Tonight, we are only 6, making the distance between us feel even greater. The meal is the Grayford standard: thick-cut beef tenderloin, asparagus glistening with hollandaise, and potatoes roasted in duck fat. The wine is a heavy Cabernet, the kind that stains the glass and dulls the senses. The only sounds are the rhythmic, metallic scrape of heavy silver on porcelain and the murmur of my father's voice. My grandfather, Victor Hale, founder of Hale Transit and Supply, sat at the head of the table. He was silent, as he had been for the past hour. Victor Hale doesn't speak unless a word is worth more than the silence it breaks. He is 81, but his presence is denser than the oak beams above us. He was a statue of old industry, carved from granite and spreadsheets. His eyes, the color of wet slate, moved slowly from speaker to speaker, his face an impassive mask. He wasn't just listening, he was weighing. Every word spoken at this table was audited. The third quarter projections for the Midwest corridor are soft. My father, Grant, said, his voice a little too loud, a little too eager. He was trying to fill the vacuum of my grandfather's silence. "But I've been in talks with the Norcrest Group, a new beverage contract. Very promising." "We're not just promising, darling, we're guaranteeing," a new voice chimed in, smooth and bright as polished chrome. And then there was Sloane. Sloane was my father's new wife. She was 42, which made her 13 years my senior and 8 years my father's junior. She was wearing a slip of emerald silk that clung to her yoga-toned body, a dress that cost more than my first car. Her blonde hair was pulled into a sleek, severe knot that highlighted her cheekbones. Her smile was a masterpiece of public relations, all bright enamel and zero warmth. She had entered our lives like a corporate raider, swift, silent, and with a flawless 5-year plan. 6 months ago, she was Sloane Mercer, a restructuring consultant. My father met at a logistics seminar in Norcrest. Now, she was Sloane Hale, and she held a new, entirely symbolic title: Strategic Advisor to Hale Transit, unpaid. Of course, the position was the prize my father had given her for their 6-month anniversary. It gave her a company email address, a passkey to the executive wing, and most importantly, a seat at this table. "The Norcrest contract is about synergy, Victor," Sloane said, leaning forward. The diamonds on her necklace caught the light from the antler chandelier. "It's not just about trucks. It's about integrating their supply chain with our data analytics. It's a 360-degree solution." I almost smiled into my wine glass. Sloane didn't know the difference between a data log and a donut, but she knew the buzzwords. She was fluent in the language of corporate memos. My father beamed at her. "Exactly. Synergy." My grandfather's gaze settled on Sloane. He said nothing. He simply took a slow sip of his water. The silence stretched, becoming sharp. Sloane's smile faltered, just a fraction, before she recovered and turned her attention to the asparagus. I kept my head down. I was the ghost at the feast. Marin Hale, the founder's granddaughter, the one who had started in the dispatch office, working the graveyard shift, the one who moved to data analysis and actually built the analytics platform Sloane was now taking credit for. To them, especially to Sloane, I was just the help, a legacy cog in the machine. The beef tenderloin was gone. The potatoes were cold. The conversation had stalled. Dying under the weight of Victor's quiet judgment, I saw my chance. I stood, gathering the heavy plates. The bone-white porcelain was edged with the dark green Hale Transit logo, a custom set from the 70s. "I'll get those, Marin," Rosa, the housekeeper, murmured, appearing from the shadows. "I've got it, Rosa. You've done enough," I said quietly. I stacked my father's plate, then Sloane's, careful not to touch the leftover smear of béarnaise. I pushed through the heavy, felt-lined swinging door that led to the kitchen. The cut was instant. The muffled, warm acoustics of the dining room vanished. I was in a different world. A cold, white, sterile box. The sound of the dining room was replaced by the high-frequency hum of the sub-zero refrigerator compressors and the rhythmic, hydraulic shush-click of the industrial dishwasher. The air smelled of chlorine, hot steam, and the bitter tang of lemon oil used to polish the acres of stainless steel. I set the plates down in the rubber-lined basin by the sink. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. My shoulders slumping. I leaned against the counter. Just for a second. My eyes closed. Monday. The board meeting was Monday at 9 a.m. The vote for the new open seat. My seat. If I could prove I deserved it. The door swung open again. I didn't need to look. The scent of her perfume, something expensive and sharp, like crushed gardenias and ambition, arrived first. "Sloane?" She let the door swing shut, plunging us into the bright, humming silence. She leaned against the stainless steel prep counter, crossing her arms. The emerald silk rustled, a sound like dry leaves. "You're terrible at this, you know," she said. I didn't turn. I picked up a glass and began to rinse it. At what? Sloane? Dishes? At this, the family, the game, slinking around, playing the devoted granddaughter. It's pathetic. Her voice was no longer the breezy, supportive melody from the dinner table. This was her real voice, low, flat, and corroded. "I'm just clearing the table," I said, my voice just as flat. "You really think you're going to stand up in that meeting on Monday, don't you?" She laughed, a dry little puff of air. "You, with your little spreadsheets, you think Victor is going to hand a board seat to a clerk?" "I'm not a clerk. I'm the head of data analytics." "You're whatever I say you are," she hissed. Stepping closer, I could feel the heat radiating off her. "And I say you're a nobody. Your father agrees. He knows you're not ready." I finally turned, rinsing my hands under the tap. Grant knows what I'm capable of. Grant knows what I tell him. He knows that I am the future of Hale Transit. I am the one bringing in the new business. I am the one saving this dusty old company from itself. You're just ballast, dead weight. I said nothing. I just stacked a plate. The silence of the kitchen seemed to magnify the sound, the wet scrape of porcelain on porcelain. "Don't ignore me, you ungrateful thing." I turned, my back to the sink. "Sloane, this isn't the time." "It's exactly the time." And she slapped me. It wasn't a movie slap, full of dramatic sound. It was a dry, ugly, functional sound. Thwack. It echoed off the tile backsplash. My head snapped to the side, my ear ringing instantly with a high-pitched whine. The fluorescent lights seemed to pulse. For a second, the only sound in the kitchen was the rattle of silver spoons in the metal basin next to the sink. Shuddering from the vibration, I tasted blood, a small, sharp bite on the inside of my cheek. She grabbed my wrist, hard. I am 5'10", built like the long-haul drivers I started my career with. Sloane is 5'4" in her heels, but her grip was steel. Her meticulously manicured nails, painted a dark, vampiric red, dug into my skin. "You will never get that seat," she whispered, her face inches from mine. Her breath was sour with wine. "You will stay in the dispatch office where you belong. You will run your reports, and you will email them to me, and I will present them. Do you understand me, Marin? I will not be undermined by a child playing office." I didn't move. I didn't raise my hand. I let the sting fade from my cheek. Let her nails bite into my arm. I just breathed. Slowly, in, out. I could feel the cold rage, but it was deep, locked in a vault. This wasn't feeling. This was data. My free hand, the one she wasn't holding, casually brushed the placket of my cotton shirt. My fingers grazed the small, cold nub of metal pinned to the inside, just below my collarbone. The mic. It was still active. The green record light was invisible from this side, but I knew it was on. It was a high-fidelity, law enforcement-grade recorder, sensitive enough to pick up a whisper in a stadium. Sloane was still ranting. "Your grandfather is an old man. He's living in the past. He doesn't see the future. I am the future." She was so consumed by her own monologue that she didn't notice. She picked up a small, steel paring knife from the cheese board that had been left on the counter. She wasn't threatening me with it, not really. She was gesturing, tapping it against the butcher block for emphasis. And then, she tapped my chest with the handle, right on my sternum. "You are nothing." The sharp clack of the steel handle against my chest, directly over the microphone, must have been deafening to the recorder. Good. Physical contact. A clear, audible threat. And in that moment, from the dining room, a new noise. The sound of a heavy chair, Victor's chair, scraping back an inch on the hardwood floor. The murmur of my father's voice stopped, mid-sentence. Silence. A different kind of silence. Not Victor's patient assessment, but a sudden, anxious void. A vacuum. Someone at the table had noticed our absence. Someone had heard the pause in the kitchen's rhythm. Sloane heard it too. Her eyes widened, just a fraction. The mask of the corporate shark was slipping, replaced by the face of a petty tyrant caught in the act. She dropped my wrist, leaving 4 perfect white crescents in my skin that were already turning red. She placed the knife back on the counter, her hand shaking slightly. She smoothed her silk dress, the PR smile already resurrecting itself, grotesque under the harsh kitchen light. We'll discuss this later, Marin, when you're being less emotional." I didn't look at her. I turned my back to her, facing the sink. I leaned in, as if checking something on a dish. My mouth was inches from the hidden mic. I whispered 2 words. "Get everything." I picked up the stack of dessert plates, my hand perfectly steady. I pushed the swinging door open. The warm light of the dining room, the smell of coffee and old wood, flooded back in. It felt like rising to the surface of a deep, cold lake. Sloane was right behind me, a phantom at my shoulder. I walked back to the table. My father and the other guests were looking down, pretending not to have noticed the long, tense pause. But my grandfather was watching me. He was exactly as I had left him, silent, bronze, waiting. He didn't look at my cheek, which was already starting to throb and flush a dark, angry red. He just looked at my eyes. I met his gaze. I placed the dessert plates on the sideboard, went back to my chair, and sat down. I picked up my water glass. As if nothing had happened at all. Sloane's perfume, that sharp gardenia with a sharp synthetic bite, drifted over the table as she sat. She picked up her fork and smiled at my father. "Darling, you were telling us about the Norcrest contract?" "Right, yes," my father, Grant, said, relieved that the awkward pause had passed. He launched back into his speech, his voice full of the easy, unearned confidence that defined him. I kept my eyes on my empty plate. My cheek was a dull, hot throb, a localized storm cloud I could feel gathering under the skin. I could already picture the bruise, a faint, yellowish-purple shadow by morning, just in time for the board meeting, a badge of honor I hadn't asked for. This was the Hale family. This was our perfect, polished veneer. We were a portrait of American enterprise, the kind you see in glossy regional business magazines. From the outside, we were Hale Transit and Supply, a third-generation, privately held logistics giant based in Riverfall. We were 600 employees, a fleet of 250 trucks, and a name etched into the side of every major warehouse complex in the state. We were a story of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, except our bootstraps were made of imported leather and paid for by the generation before. The company was my grandfather's life. It was his blood and iron. For my father, it was a stage. Grant Hale loved the idea of Hale Transit. He loved the photo ops, the ribbon cuttings for a new distribution center, the smell of a brand new tractor-trailer cab. He loved posing beside the gleaming chrome grille of a new Mack truck, his hand resting proprietarily on the fender, the Hale logo large and proud behind him. He was a master of the Riverfall Chamber of Commerce breakfast. What he loved less, I'd learned, was reading the reports, the actual numbers, the ELD logs, the fuel cost analyses, the quarterly P&L statements. Those he found tedious, those he left to me. Into this comfortable, coasting world, Sloane had descended. She appeared 6 months ago, emerging like a perfectly sculpted Venus from a global logistics synergy seminar in Norcrest. She was a restructuring expert. She had consulted for half a dozen companies I'd barely heard of. She was all sharp angles, PowerPoint presentations, and a vocabulary that consisted entirely of words like optimization, scalability, and value add. My father was enchanted. He was a man who'd spent his life surrounded by the familiar dusty scent of diesel and warehouse dust. Sloane smelled like an airport business lounge, all sharp perfume, Nespresso, and recycled air. She was new. She was shiny. She wasn't my mother, who had died 5 years ago, leaving a quiet, comfortable void. Sloane was the opposite of a void. She was a cacophony. They were married in 6 months, a quiet, tasteful ceremony at a vineyard that I was told about via email. My own path into the company had been different. I hadn't been gifted a title. My grandfather, Victor, had insisted on it. "You want to run a trucking company, Marin?" He'd asked me the day I graduated with a degree in business analytics. Go learn what a truck is. So I started in dispatch. My first day was a 3 a.m. shift. The office was a cramped, cinder-block room that smelled of burnt coffee, old vinyl, and the faint, sour tang of driver anxiety. I spent a year on the night shift, my voice hoarse from coordinating with drivers who were running late, who'd hit bad weather in the Rockies, whose refrigerated units were failing outside of Phoenix. I learned the routes. I learned the names of the drivers' kids. I learned the precise, visceral cost of a 2-hour delay. From there, I moved to the garage, learning inventory and maintenance scheduling. And finally, I earned my desk. I moved into data analysis, a small, windowless office between accounting and HR, and I began to build the systems they'd never had. I was the one who integrated the ELD, electronic logging device, data with the fuel receipts. I built the dashboards that tracked cost per mile against driver hours. I was the one who, 3 months ago, found the ghost. It was a line item, an anomaly, a series of escalating warehousing and logistics costs, but the invoices were thin. Just a vendor name and a single, lump sum charge. No itemization, no pallet count, no square footage. The vendor was Riverlight Partners, LLC. The cost center was a new one, labeled only Warehouse 17B. I cross-referenced 17B with our WMS, our warehouse management system. It didn't exist. There was no Warehouse 17B. I brought my findings to my father. He'd waved me off, shuffling papers on his large, clean desk. "Marin, it's probably just a third-party overflow. Sloane's handling it. She's got a whole plan to optimize our Q4 holding costs." I pressed, "But the invoices aren't right, and the costs are climbing. 12% in 2 months. Sloane's the expert. Marin, she's a consultant. Let her consult." So I went to the next family dinner. I brought it up over dessert, trying to be diplomatic. "I was just looking at the new vendor contracts," I said, aiming the question at Sloane. "Riverlight Partners. I'd love to see the specs on that warehouse. 17B, I want to integrate it into our tracking system." My aunt, my father's sister, had given me a look of pure, pained disapproval. "Marin, dear, must we talk about spreadsheets at the table?" Sloane had smiled, that patient, PR smile. She'd placed her hand on my father's arm. "Marin is just so diligent. She's a wonderful asset." Then she'd turn to the others. "It's a new flexible space contract. Very cutting edge. It's not something that would show up in the old systems. It's part of the new optimization strategy I'm rolling out." The subject was changed, but the message was clear. Later, I'd overheard my aunt in the hall. "She's so hard," she'd whispered to my father. "So lacking in subtlety. It's not feminine. She's just like her grandfather." It was meant as an insult. I took it as the highest compliment I'd ever been paid. From then on, Sloane's campaign against me became a quiet, insidious whisper campaign. In front of clients, she'd introduce me with a laugh. "This is Marin. She's our little Excel wizard. I just don't know what we'd do without her spreadsheets." It was a pat on the head, a dismissal in plain sight. She reduced my work, my analysis, my entire division, to the status of a high school girl's hobby. I was frustrated. I was angry. I was gathering data that showed a clear pattern of escalating, undocumented costs, and I was being told I was cute. I went to the only person who would listen to data. I went to my grandfather. I found him in his home study, a room that smelled of pipe tobacco, a habit he'd quit 20 years ago, but the scent never left, and old paper. He was reading a physical, paper-bound freight ledger. I didn't complain. I didn't mention Sloane's insults or my father's dismissal. I just laid out the facts. "This vendor, Riverlight Partners, has no physical address listed," I said. "The costs are classified as warehousing, but there are corresponding spikes in fuel consumption on Friday nights for a specific group of trucks. Those trucks aren't logging any deliveries on those nights. The invoices are being approved by a marketing assistant Sloane hired last month, not by anyone in operations." I laid the spreadsheet on his desk, a simple, clean 3-page report. Victor Hale stared at it for a long time. He didn't look at me. He just traced the line of fuel costs with one long, slightly arthritic finger. Finally, he looked up. His eyes were clear and cold. "Observe, don't argue," he said. His voice was a low rumble. "Let them talk. You listen. You're a Hale. We don't get hysterical. We get receipts. The numbers will talk when it's time." He pushed the report back toward me. "This is good. Get more." That was the day I stopped arguing. That was the day I stopped trying to be heard in meetings. I became a ghost. I learned to be as silent as my grandfather. I went back to my office. I started cross-referencing the ghost-run truck IDs with our GPS and ELD logs. I pulled fuel station security footage. I did a deep dive on Riverlight Partners LLC. And I started collecting a different kind of data. Which brought me back to the dinner table at Grayford. The coffee was being poured. Sloane was laughing at one of my father's jokes, her hand on his, the picture of the perfect, supportive wife. My cheek throbbed. I had spent months collecting paper evidence, invoices, GPS logs, LLC registration documents. Tonight, I had collected something else, something the spreadsheets couldn't show. In the breast pocket of my shirt, the digital recorder was still silently capturing the ambient sound of the dinner, the clink of coffee cups, the murmur of my father's voice. It had all been recorded, the hum of the kitchen, the flat, dead sound of the slap, the scrape of the silver spoons, and Sloane's voice, low and vicious, confirming her entire strategy. "I will not be undermined by a child playing office." My grandfather was right. The numbers would talk, and I had just recorded the soundtrack. The coffee was bitter, scalding my tongue. I barely noticed. I sat at the mahogany table, the bruise on my cheekbone beginning to pulse with a low, dull heat. Sloane was laughing, her voice a bright, brittle sound in the warm room. She was talking about a charity gala. My father was nodding, captivated. They saw a family dinner. I saw a crime scene. The slap in the kitchen wasn't the beginning of this. It was the end. The real story. The one that mattered. Hadn't happened over dinner plates. It had happened under the sterile, 2 a.m. glow of my dual monitors, in the silence of my office, 3 months ago. It began, as these things always do. Not with a bang, but with a number that didn't add up. I was running a standard quarterly audit on vendor expenditures. My system flags anomalies, deviations over 5% from the previous quarter's mean. A new line item pinged. Warehouse 17B, Logistics and Holding. The charges were escalating. $50,000 in July, $75,000 in August, $110,000 in September. The vendor. Riverlight Partners, LLC. I leaned back, the vinyl of my office chair creaking in the silent building. Warehouse 17B. I opened our warehouse management system. The WMS. It's the digital Bible of Hail Transit. It contains a map of every facility we own or lease, every bay door, every rack, every single square foot of floor space. I ran a search. Warehouse 17B. The system returned. No results found. I ran it again. 17B. Riverlight. Nothing. This wasn't a typo. This was a $110,000 per month ghost. My grandfather's voice was in my head. The numbers will talk. Okay, so what numbers? If we were paying for a warehouse, we had to be using it. That meant trucks. That meant fuel. That meant driver hours. I pulled the invoices from Riverlight. They were laughably thin. No itemization, no pallet count, no accessorial charges, just a single, round number for strategic overflow. The invoices were being routed through the marketing department, which made 0 sense. They were approved by a K. Jensen. I cross-referenced the payment dates with our ELD logs, the electronic logging devices that track every truck's movement, speed, and engine status. A pattern emerged. It was beautiful in its simple, stupid audacity. Friday nights. Every Friday, between 8 p.m. and 2 a.m., a specific set of 3 trucks, 14, 22, and 51, logged identical, short-haul routes. Friday night is dead time. Our LTL, less than load shipments, are sorted by 6 p.m. for Monday delivery. Our long-haul FTL, full truckload drivers are already hundreds of miles away, deep into their runs. These 3 trucks, however, were clocking 6 hours of local travel, starting and ending at our main Riverfall depot. The manifests for these runs were blank. The cargo was listed as repo or internal transfer. The fuel receipts were staggering. These trucks were burning diesel like they were hauling lead, but they were driving empty. I had the what, I needed the where. I pulled the raw GPS data from the ELD logs. I didn't just want the route, I wanted the coordinates. I plugged the longitude and latitude of their primary stop, a 2-hour idle period, into the satellite map. I stared at the screen. It wasn't a warehouse. It wasn't a distribution center. It wasn't even a building. It was a gravel lot, a 5-acre expanse of weeds and cracked asphalt on the undeveloped industrial edge of town, sandwiched between a defunct cement factory and a wetlands preserve. The property owner listed on the county auditor's site? Riverlight Partners, LLC. My heart wasn't racing. It was slow, cold, pumping ice. I was no longer an analyst. I was a coroner, and I was looking at a body. Riverlight Partners, LLC. I went to the Secretary of State's online business portal. I typed in the name. Public records are a beautiful thing. The LLC was filed 8 months prior. It was a domestic LLC, filed by a standard, boilerplate legal service. I clicked on the Members Managers tab. It was a small, nested fund, and the name of the fund's managing member, the person who signed the digital incorporation papers, was listed clear as day. Sloan Mercer. Not Sloan Hale. Sloan Mercer. Her name before she'd married my father. Her consultant identity. She hadn't even bothered to cover her tracks. This was pure arrogance. She was billing Hail Transit for renting an empty gravel lot that she, herself, owned. But the fraud was deeper. The fuel was one part. The rent was another. What about the trucks themselves? They were logging thousands of miles a month going nowhere. That meant wear and tear, brakes, tires, oil. I opened our maintenance logs. And there it was. Truck 14, 22, and 51. All three had received full brake replacements, new tire sets, and twice-monthly premium synthetic oil changes. The cost was astronomical. The vendor? Mercer Fleet Care. I didn't even have to look. I typed it into the state portal. Ding, a second LLC, filed on the same day as Riverlight Partners. Managing member, Sloan Mercer. She had created a closed loop, a perfect parasitic ecosystem. She invented a ghost warehouse, Riverlight Partners. She sent hail trucks on ghost runs to her empty lot, burning hail fuel. She billed hail transit for the rent on the lot. She billed hail transit for the maintenance, Mercer Fleet Care, on the trucks running the empty routes. And the signature, the approval. Who was signing off on thousands of dollars for brake pads for the marketing department? K. Jensen. I checked the employee directory. Kyle Jensen. Hired 9 weeks ago. Title: Brand Strategy Associate. His LinkedIn profile picture showed him at a polo match. His previous job? Intern. At Sloan Mercer Consulting. She hadn't just built a siphon. She'd brought in her own plumber. I spent the next 48 hours building the dossier. This couldn't be a spreadsheet. It had to be a story, told in data so clean and cold it was undeniable. I built a 12-page executive summary. Page 1. The Warehouse 17B expenditure graph, showing the spike. Page 2. A side-by-side. Our WMS search, no results, next to the Riverlight Partners invoice. Page 3. The Friday night GPS map, the routes highlighted in red, the satellite image of the empty lot. Page 4. The LLC filing for Riverlight Partners. Sloan Mercer's name circled. Page 5. The LLC filing for Mercer Fleet Care. Sloan Mercer's name circled. Page 6. A breakdown of the maintenance invoices from Mercer Fleet Care set against the maintenance logs for the rest of our fleet. The cost delta was 300%. Page 7. The digital signature of Kyle Jensen on a $12,000 invoice for tires. Beside it, his job title, Brand Strategy Associate. Page 8. The video. I pulled the drive recorder data from truck 14. It was grainy. Time-stamped night vision. It showed the truck pulling into the gravel lot. Idling. It showed the driver getting out, smoking a cigarette, and standing there for an hour. Proof of location. Proof of inactivity. Proof of waste. I attached the full 200-page appendix, every invoice, every log, every metadata file. I didn't send it to my father. I didn't send it to the CFO. I sent it to one person, my grandfather. It went to his private, encrypted internal mailbox, the one he checked himself every morning. The subject line was simple. Warehouse 17B does not exist. I sent it at 11:58 p.m. The reply came at 12:01 a.m. He was clearly still awake, reading his ledgers. His email was one line. Monday, 9:00 a.m., board meeting. Prepare the 12-page summary for distribution. Hard copies. He didn't say, "This is horrifying." He didn't ask if I was sure. He didn't question my data. He just changed the battleground. That was 2 weeks ago. I knew the data was ironclad, but I also knew Sloan. I knew her skill at deflecting, at spinning, at charming my father and the other good old boys on the board. She would call the data a misinterpretation, a clerical error. She would attack the source, me. She would paint me as the jealous, difficult granddaughter, the clerk who didn't understand high-level strategy. She would say I was bitter about her marriage to my father. The data proved the what. It couldn't prove the intent. It couldn't prove the malice. So I added a plan B. I bought the recorder, the one now pinned inside my shirt, the one that had just captured the sound of her hand striking my face, the one that had captured her admitting her entire motive. You will never get that board seat. I will not be undermined by a child playing office. The data file was the engine of the locomotive. The audio file was the steel spike that would nail it to the track. I looked across the table. Sloan was dabbing her lips with a napkin. Her smile radiant. She thought she had won. She thought she had put me in my place. I picked up my coffee cup. My hand was perfectly steady. The hot throb on my cheek was just a reminder, a final data point. The numbers were ready, and now, so was the narrative. The dinner dissolved. It ended not with a specific event, but like ice melting under a low, steady heat. The small talk evaporated. My aunt and uncle, sensing the tension they couldn't name, made their excuses about the long drive back to Riverfall. My father, Grant, walked them to the door, his voice full of its usual booming, hollow hospitality. Sloane remained at the table, scrolling through her phone, a small, satisfied smile playing on her lips. She was bathed in the warm light of the antler chandelier. The picture of modern success. She had, in her mind, won the engagement. She had put the Excel clerk in her place. She looked up as my father returned, her smile widening. "Darling, I was just checking the setup for Monday's presentation. It's going to be flawless." I sat in my chair, nursing my now cold coffee. The throb in my cheek was a dull metronome. Counting down the seconds, I could feel the small, hard rectangle of the recorder pressed against my ribs. My grandfather, Victor, who had been silent through the coffee and the goodbyes, stood up. The room, or what was left of it, fell quiet. Grant stopped, mid-step. Sloane looked up from her phone. Victor Hale didn't look at them. He looked at me. His slate-gray eyes were unreadable. "Marin," his voice was a low rumble. "The porch." He didn't wait for a reply. He turned and walked to the heavy French doors that led to the back of the lodge. He moved with a slow, deliberate economy of motion, the way an old lion moves. I stood. My father started to say something. "Dad, it's late. She's—" Sloane put a hand on his arm, her voice light and proprietary. "Let her go. Grant, Victor needs his little debrief. It's fine." She was dismissing me again, sending the help to attend to the patriarch. I said nothing. I followed him. I pushed open the heavy glass door. The night air hit me like a physical thing. It was cold, sharp, and clean. After the suffocating, overwarm dining room that smelled of cooked meat and Sloane's perfume, this was like breathing for the first time. The wind was moving through the towering pines that surrounded the lodge, a sound like a distant ocean. It carried the scent of new shore in autumn, damp earth, wet pine needles, and the faint, mineral tang of cold granite. The only light came from a single, yellow carriage lamp, casting long shadows across the stone patio. Victor was standing at a small, wrought iron table. A silver tray was already there. Rosa must have set it out. On it was a steaming thermal carafe and two heavy, ceramic mugs. He was pouring, not coffee, black tea. The steam rose in a thick plume and was instantly torn apart by the wind. He didn't look at me. He just pushed one of the mugs toward me. I wrapped my hands around it. The ceramic was almost painfully hot. A solid, grounding presence. The heat felt good on my frozen fingers. My cheek was a dull, electric ache. For a full minute, we just stood there. He drank his tea. I watched the black wall of the forest, listening to the wind. He wasn't a man who wasted time, but he was never in a hurry. He was waiting. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't ask me to show him my cheek. He didn't have to. I knew, with a sudden, cold certainty, that the thin steel paring knife had not been the only thing to tap the microphone. Victor Hale hadn't just sensed the tension. He had heard the slap. Finally, he spoke, his voice low, blending with the sound of the wind. "How much noise can you stand, Marin?" I turned to look at him. His face was in shadow, only the hard line of his jaw visible in the lamplight. It wasn't the question I was expecting. "What do you mean?" "The truth," he said. "When it finally rings out, it's a loud, ugly sound. It shatters things. People yell. People cry. People break. Your father will break." He took a slow sip of tea. "How much of that noise can you stand?" I thought about his question. I thought about the ringing in my ear in the kitchen. I thought about the sound of Sloane's voice, full of venom. I thought about the coming storm on Monday. "I can stand enough," I said, my voice steady. enough that I won't have to shout to be heard over it. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched the corner of his mouth. He nodded. Once, as if I'd given the correct answer to a long-forgotten riddle. "Good," he said. He set his mug down on the iron table. He reached beside his chair, where a worn leather briefcase sat. He didn't open it. He lifted a single, thick manila envelope that had been resting on top of it. He placed it on the table between us. The sound was a dull, heavy thud against the metal. "Hale Family Trust, Amendment, Draft." The words were typed on a simple white label. "You think I am silent because I am weak," he said, not as a question. "Your father thinks it. She certainly thinks it. They think the old man is fading, that he's a relic." He tapped the envelope with one long, arthritic finger. "I am silent because I am listening. I am silent because I am giving people the rope. I want to see who will engineer their own ruin. I want to see who strikes before the lights come on. I want to see what they do in the dark, when they think no one is watching." My heart, which had been a cold, steady drum, gave a single, hard kick. "What is this?" I asked, my hand hovering over the envelope. It was thick, an inch thick. "It's a fail-safe," he said. "The trust agreement governs all family voting shares. My block, your father's, the shares that were your grandmother's, 51% of Hale Transit and Supply." He looked at me, his eyes now seeming to glitter in the dim light. "I had my lawyers draft this amendment 6 months ago, the day your father called to tell me he was marrying Sloane Mercer." I picked it up. It was heavy. "It is Amendment 7B, he said, an integrity clause. It stipulates that in the event of proven material financial fraud or fiduciary malfeasance by an officer or family member, the full voting rights of the entire 51% family block can be temporarily and unilaterally transferred to a single, designated protector of the trust, to ensure the continuity and integrity of the company." The wind gusted, whipping my hair across my face. My cheeks stung from the cold. "A single protector," I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. "Who?" "Who do you think, Marin?" I looked down at the envelope. This was the real power. This wasn't just a board seat. This was the throne. "You knew," I said. "You knew she was a thief, even before my report." "I knew she was a parasite," he corrected, his voice hard. "I've seen her type my whole life. They attach themselves to strength and suck it dry. They see your father's weakness as an opportunity. They see my silence as decay. I just didn't know what she was stealing. You found the pipes. Marin, you found 17B. I finally understood. The report, the data I sent you, it was good. It was ironclad. But it wasn't enough." "No," he agreed. "It wasn't. The data proves the crime. It's cold. But it doesn't prove the character. It doesn't prove the malice. On Monday, she would have cried. She would have blamed the new marketing boy, Kyle Jensen. She would have said it was an aggressive but misinterpreted optimization strategy. She would have said you, the jealous granddaughter, were twisting the facts. And your father would have wanted to believe her." He paused, looking at my face, his gaze finally resting on the swelling shadow on my cheekbone. "You needed the why. You needed the hot evidence, the malice. You needed to show the board who she is, not just what she did." He looked at the pocket of my shirt. "So you brought the microphone?" My blood went colder than the night air. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. He knew. He knew. A thin, dry smile cracked his lips. It was a terrifying sight. "You think you're the only one who can plan, child?" he asked. "I told you to bring it." My mind raced back, scrambling through the last few weeks. When? How? I never told him. I never told anyone. "Last week," he said, as if reading my thoughts from the steam of my breath. "In my study, after you gave me the first draft of the 17B dossier, do you remember what I said to you as you were leaving?" I tried to recall. It was a blur of adrenaline. You told me the numbers would talk." "No, after that, the very last thing, you were at the door." I closed my eyes. I was at the door. He was behind his desk, He'd said, "I'll see you at Grayford. Saturday. Sloane will be there." And then it hit me. A memory so clear it was like a photograph. He had said, "Sloane will be nervous about the board meeting. She'll try to corner you. Don't go into the kitchen empty-handed." I looked at him, stunned. I thought you meant I should bring my data. I thought you meant be prepared." "I didn't mean a spreadsheet." "Marin," he said, finishing his tea. "A spreadsheet can't record a threat. A spreadsheet can't record a slap." The full weight of it settled on me. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a crime of opportunity. This was a trap. "Tonight," I whispered. "This whole dinner, it was a test." "It was a character test," he confirmed. "For both of you, I needed to see if you had the steel to take the hit, to hold the line, to gather the evidence without flinching, without getting hysterical, to be a Hale." "And Sloane?" He looked past me, toward the brightly lit kitchen window. "I needed to see if she was arrogant enough, and stupid enough, to throw the punch." He picked up my mug, which I hadn't touched, and his own. "And she was," he said. "She failed." He turned and walked back inside, leaving me alone in the cold, with the wind, the smell of pine, and the heavy weight of the Hale family trust in my hands. My plan B, his plan A. He had set the board, he had made me his queen, and he had just watched Sloane, a pawn with a crown, take herself off the map. The French door clicked shut, locking me in the silent, overheated lodge. Sloane and my father were in the main lounge, the low murmur of their voices a distant, irrelevant hum. The heavy manila envelope my grandfather had given me was cold under my arm. I didn't go to the guest room I'd been assigned. I went to the small, wood-paneled office my grandfather kept on the ground floor. It smelled of old paper and leather polish. I sat at his desk, a massive, scarred oak partner's desk, and laid the trust amendment on the blotter. It sat there like an unexploded bomb. The clock on the wall read 10:17 p.m. The meeting was in less than 11 hours. My first move was digital. I reached into my shirt and unpinned the small, cold recorder. My fingers were steady. I plugged the micro USB into the port on my laptop. The drive mounted instantly. REC001. Wave. I put in my noise-canceling earbuds, isolating myself from the house. I hit play. First, the ambient hum of the kitchen, the clatter of plates. Then Sloane's voice, low and acidic. "You really think you're going to stand up in that meeting?" I listened to the entire 9-minute file. My own voice, flat and calm, her escalating venom, and then the sound, the sharp, dry thwack of the slap. It was louder than I remembered, a sound of pure, unadulterated contempt. It was followed by the sharp clack of the knife handle against my chest, right on the mic. And finally, her confession. "I will not be undermined by a child playing office." I didn't listen to it twice. I saved the file. Evidence a Sloane Hale audio, wave. I opened my encryption software, locked the file with a 64-character key, and opened a secure email client. I addressed it to Marcus Breyer, the independent counsel for the Hale Family Trust. He was a man my grandfather trusted, a lawyer whose firm was in a different state and had no other business with Hale Transit. Subject: Monday 9 a.m. Supporting evidence audio. Body: Mr. Breyer. Attached is an encrypted audio file pertaining to the 9 a.m. board meeting. It contains evidence of threats and physical assault by a company officer relevant to the agenda. Please have this available. Marin Hale. I hit send. The file uploaded and vanished into the ether. That was the hot evidence, now safe off-site. My second move was procedural. I picked up my cell phone. It was 10:45 p.m. I scrolled to Janelle Reed, our head of HR. She'd been with the company for 30 years. She was old school, by the book, and feared no one except my grandfather. I called her personal cell. She picked up on the third ring, her voice wary. "Janelle, it's Marin Hale. I apologize for the hour." "Marin, what's wrong?" She knew I wouldn't call this late for anything small. I need to make a formal report. Time stamped for this evening. I'm at a company-related function at the Grayford Lodge. At approximately 8:50 p.m., I was physically assaulted and verbally threatened by Sloane Hale. Silence on the line. Just the sound of her breathing. Janelle was processing the names, the implications. Assaulted, she repeated. Not a question, a confirmation. Yes, a slap, and I was physically restrained by the wrist. The threat was explicit and related to my position and the upcoming board vote. I am classifying it as an act of workplace violence and intimidation. Are you safe? She asked. Her voice was pure HR. I am, but I need the report logged tonight. I need it on the books before 9 a.m. tomorrow. It is directly relevant to the board's business. I understand, she said, her voice now cold and professional. I am opening a file right now. 10:46 p.m. Saturday, October 24th. Report of incident. Sloane Hale, aggressor. Marin Hale, victim. I will email you the formal intake form. You will state that you will provide a full, detailed statement following the board meeting. Thank you, Janelle. Be careful, Marin, she said, and hung up. The legal paper trail was now active. My third move was visual. I opened another window on my laptop. The security feed for the lodge. My grandfather was a man who believed in data, and cameras provided the best kind. There were no cameras in the kitchen, but there was one covering the side door egress, the one that led from the kitchen to the service driveway. I rewound the feed to 8:48 p.m. There. The door burst open. I stumbled out, as if pushed. The footage was grainy, black and white infrared, but it was clear. I was rubbing my wrist. Sloane followed me out, her face a mask of fury. She grabbed my arm again, pulling me back toward the kitchen. The motion was violent, a yank. It wasn't the slap, but it was corroboration. It was a visual match for the audio, proof of a physical, aggressive confrontation. I downloaded the 30-second clip, Evidence B. Sloane Hale Aggression, MP4. Now the packets, the cold evidence. I opened the 12-page summary I had prepared. Warehouse 17B does not exist. I went to page 10. I created a new, small section. Addendum, supporting corroboration. I generated a QR code, not a simple one, a dynamic, trackable one. I linked it to a new, secure cloud folder. Into that folder, I dropped 3 files. Evidence of Sloane Hale audio. Evidence B. Sloane Hale Aggression, MP4. The complete raw GPS and ELD logs for trucks 14, 22, and 51. The QR code was now a digital key to the entire case. I embedded it on page 10. I hit print, the old laser printer in the corner whirred to life, a comforting, mechanical sound in the digital silence. It churned out the 12 copies. I collated them, 12 pages each. I slid each one into a simple, severe, black linen binder. Done. My phone buzzed on the desk, a pop-up notification from Instagram. It was my father. He had just posted a photo from earlier in the evening. It was a selfie of him and Sloane, taken at the dinner table. They were smiling, his arm around her. Her diamond necklace glittered. The caption, "A wonderful evening at Grayford with my beautiful wife, so proud of the Hale family and all we're building. We stand united. Big week ahead. Legacy, Hale family, Hale transit." A wave of nausea, cold and acidic, rose in my throat. United. My cheekbone throbbed where her hand had struck. His blindness. His willful, desperate blindness. I closed the app. I opened my text messages. To Dad. I typed, "Dad, the board meeting is at 9 a.m. Please be on time. It's important." I deleted it. Too needy. I typed, "Don't be late tomorrow." Too cold. I settled on, "Dad, be on time tomorrow." I hit send. No emoji, no love you, just a command, an instruction. He needed to be there. He needed to see. I was putting the binders into my leather satchel when my laptop pinged. A different sound. A system alert. It was from my server admin console. I had security traps on all my project files. Alert. Unauthorized access attempt. Directory. Hale, Analytics, private/MO, Hale/project, 17B. My heart didn't stop. It just got harder. Project 17B was my internal name for the ghost warehouse investigation. The folder was locked, accessible only by my terminal. The alert showed the attempt had failed, but it logged the source. IP address 10.1.15.42. Marketing Wing. 3rd floor. User ID K. Jensen. Kyle Jensen, Sloane's pet, the brand strategy associate, the boy who signed the invoices. Sloane was panicking. The slap hadn't been enough to silence me. Now she was scared. She had sent her assistant, in the middle of a Saturday night, to break into my files, to see what I had. They were amateurs. They were sloppy. I logged the attempt. I took a screenshot. Time-stamped. 11:58 p.m. I named the file Evidence RC Access Breach, PNG. I added it to the secure cloud folder linked by the QR code. I didn't just relock the directory. I went into the root server and changed the permissions. The folder Project 17B no longer existed to anyone but me. It was now a black hole. I closed my laptop. I looked at the heavy manila envelope from my grandfather. I slid it into the satchel, next to the 12 binders. The clock on the wall read 1:47 a.m. The lodge was tomb silent. The old house slept. I walked to the guest room. I didn't bother with the bed. On the back of the door, my suit was hanging. A dark charcoal gray wool suit, a crisp, plain white blouse, my armor. I set my phone alarm for 5:30 a.m. I felt no fatigue. I felt a sharp, vibrating clarity, a humming, high-frequency energy. This was the moment before the first move in a chess game I had been studying for months. I lay down on top of the covers, my shoes still on. I closed my eyes, but I didn't sleep. I just listened to the sound of the wind outside and the much, much louder sound of the clock, counting down. The Riverfall boardroom was on the top floor, a glass box suspended over the main depot. Even from 8 stories up, you could feel the low, seismic rumble of the yard, the coupling of trailers, the hydraulic hiss of air brakes. The room was designed to project power. A 20-foot table of polished black granite, 12 high-backed leather chairs, and a single, panoramic window. The light was cold. The white, recessed LEDs from the ceiling were unforgiving, reflecting off the granite, making everyone look pale, surgical. It was 9:00 a.m., sharp. They were all there. My grandfather, Victor, sat at the head of the table. He was a portrait of stillness, his hands clasped on the blotter in front of him. To his right, my father, Grant, looking fresh-pressed and nervous, adjusting his tie. Beside him, Sloane. She was the only spot of color in the room, wearing a sharp, cobalt blue dress. She looked radiant, confident. I'd even covered the slight redness on my cheek with concealer this morning. On my grandfather's left sat CFO Dalton. Robert Dalton was a man made of numbers. He'd been with Hale for 40 years. He was humorless, precise, and loyal to the bottom line above all else. Next to him was Arthur Hayes, our general counsel, a thin, dry man who looked like he was made of parchment and case law. At the far end of the table were the 2 independent directors, Ms. Alvarez and Mr. Byrne, brought in for objective governance. They looked bored, sipping coffee, ready for a standard quarterly review. And then there was me. I sat on Dalton's side, my leather satchel on the floor beside me. My suit was charcoal. My blouse was white. I was just Marin, the analyst. Victor Hale looked at the clock on the wall. 9:01 a.m. "This meeting of the Hale Transit Board is called to order," he said, his voice a low gravel. The agenda was distributed. Item 1, Q4 projections and a new cost-saving proposal. He nodded, almost imperceptibly, toward Sloane. Sloane lit up. She stood, her PR smile switching on, bathing the room in its artificial warmth. She placed her iPad on the table, which was wirelessly synced to the 80-inch monitor on the wall. "Thank you. Victor, good morning. Everyone?" Her voice was smooth, rehearsed. "As strategic advisor, I've spent the last 6 months doing a deep operational dive. While Grant has been making incredible headway with new contracts like Norcrest," she smiled at my father, who beamed back, "I've been focused on the other side of the ledger, optimization." She clicked a button on her iPad. A beautiful, clean slide appeared on the screen. It was all rounded edges and sans serif fonts. Optimization and synergy. A new path forward. "I've identified key redundancies in our logistics chain," she continued. "By consolidating our third-party warehousing and streamlining our fleet maintenance schedules, I have a clear, actionable plan, and I am projecting, conservatively, a 14% reduction in operating costs by the end of the fiscal year." 14%. It was a beautiful, impossible number. CFO Dalton raised an eyebrow. My father looked proud. "A full 14%, she repeated. "The full proposal is being synced to your tablets now." "Thank you, Sloan," I said. My voice cut through her presentation. It wasn't loud, but it was clear, and it was cold. She stopped, her smile faltering. "Marin, we're not at the Q&A yet. This is a top-level presentation." "I know," I said. I stood up. I reached into my satchel and pulled out the 12 black linen binders. "But my presentation is a prerequisite for yours." I walked the length of the table. I placed a binder in front of each board member, a solid black square on the polished black table. I gave one to my father. I gave one to Sloan. I gave one to my grandfather. Sloan looked at the cover and laughed, a small, tight sound. "Marin, what is this? Your homework?" General Counsel Hayes put on his reading glasses. CFO Dalton opened his immediately. On the plain white label on the cover were 5 words. "Warehouse 17B does not exist." Sloane's smile froze. Her face went blank. My father looked confused. "Marin, what is this? 17B? That's Sloane's project." "Exactly," I said. I returned to my seat. "Please turn to page 1. The room was silent, save for the sound of 8 binders opening, of heavy cardstock turning. On page 1, the graph of escalating charges. On page 2, the WMS screenshot. No results, placed next to a $110,000 invoice from Riverlight Partners, LLC. I heard Dalton's breath hiss out. He wasn't looking at the binder anymore. He was looking at Sloan. "Sloan," Dalton said, his voice quiet, dangerous. "What is this?" It's a proprietary holding name, Robert," Sloan said, her voice a shade too high. "For a new, flexible space contract, it wouldn't be in the old system. Marin just doesn't have the clearance." "Page 3, I said. My voice was calm, the voice of an analyst. "Page 3 is the GPS telemetry from the trucks assigned to 17B. You'll see the routes mapped in red. You will also see the satellite coordinates for the destination." I stood and took control of the main monitor. Sloane's beautiful optimization slide vanished, replaced by my screen. It was a grainy black and white image. "This," I said, "is the drive recorder video from Truck 14, time-stamped last Friday at 11:32 p.m. The video played. It showed the truck backing into a dark, empty, weed-choked gravel lot. It showed the driver getting out, lighting a cigarette, and leaning against the cab. "This is Warehouse 17B, I said. "A gravel lot. We have been paying, for 3 months, for a ghost. If you'll look at the overlay, you'll see the GPS coordinates, which match the invoices, and the property records, which list the owner." Sloan was white. This is a subcontractor. This is not, I was misled." "Page 5, I continued, ignoring her. The screen changed. It was no longer a video. It was a simple, stark organizational chart, a flow chart. "This is the public filing for Riverlight Partners, LLC, I said, pointing with a laser. It's owned by a small fund. As you can see, the managing member, the signatory on the incorporation documents, is Sloan Mercer. The sound in the room died. My father made a small, choking noise. Sloan? Ms. Alvarez and Mr. Byrne, the independent directors, were no longer bored. They were leaning forward, their faces grim. It gets worse, I said. Page 6, the maintenance invoices, the ghost trucks, 14, 22, and 51, have received over $80,000 in non-standard maintenance in the last quarter. They were older trucks, Sloan almost shouted, her hands flat on the table. They needed the upkeep for the new routes. The vendor for that maintenance, I said, clicking to the next slide, was Mercer Fleet Care. As you can see from the state filing, it was incorporated on the same day as Riverlight Partners. The office address is a P.O. box. The managing member, also Sloan Mercer. Dalton closed his binder with a soft thud. She created a closed loop, he whispered, his face ashen. Billing us for rent on her own property, billing us for maintenance on the trucks she was running into the ground to justify the maintenance. It's perfect. Sloan, my father said. His voice was trembling. Tell them it's not true. Tell them this is a misunderstanding. Sloan stood up, her chair scraping back. Her face was no longer pale. It was flushed a dark, ugly red. This is an attack. This is a bitter, jealous child who is angry about her father's marriage. She's twisting data. She's been trying to undermine me for months. You can't prove any of this. She's right, I said. The room looked at me. Sloan stared, confused by the agreement. The data proves the crime, I said, but it doesn't prove the intent. It doesn't prove the malice. You're right, Sloan. The board needs to know why you did this. I looked at Arthur Hayes, the lawyer. Mr. Hayes, is a recording of a threat made by a company officer against another employee relevant to a board decision on that officer's fitness? Hayes looked surprised. If it pertains to company business and a motive for this, yes, it would be highly relevant, as would any act of physical intimidation. Thank you, I said. Please turn to page 10. You'll find a QR code. It links to a secure folder containing 3 addendums. The first is a log of an unauthorized attempt to access my secure files last night, originating from the marketing department. The second is security footage of a physical altercation. And the third is this. I unmuted my laptop. I pressed play. The file was evidence, a Sloan Hale audio wave. The speakers in the boardroom were high fidelity. They were designed for transnational video calls. First, the bright, sterile hum of the Grayford kitchen. My voice, quiet. I'm just clearing the table. Sloane's voice, low and venomous, filled the sterile room. You, with your little spreadsheets, you think Victor is going to hand a board seat to a clerk? My father's face crumpled. He looked at Sloane, his mouth open. We heard my flat reply. We heard her escalation. And then, the sound. Thwack! The sound of the slap was so sharp, so clear, so loud in the silent boardroom, that Ms. Alvarez flinched and put a hand to her mouth. My father physically recoiled, as if he'd been struck himself. Then, Sloane's voice, a vicious whisper. You ungrateful thing. You will never get that seat. You will stay in the dispatch office where you belong. You will run your reports, and you will email them to me, and I will present them. Do you understand me, Marin? I will not be undermined by a child playing office. I stopped the recording. The silence that followed was absolute. It was a vacuum. Sloan Hale stood there, her face a mask of disbelief and pure animal panic. She looked at my father, who wouldn't meet her eyes. She looked at the directors, who were staring at her with undisguised contempt. Arthur Hayes, the lawyer, was the first to speak. He cleared his throat. His voice was dry as dust. What we have here, he said, is 2 distinct, catastrophic failures. First, we have a clear documented case of self-dealing, fiduciary malfeasance, and conspiracy to defraud the company. That is a legal matter. He paused, then continued. Second, we have direct recorded evidence of a corporate officer, Sloan Hale, committing an act of physical battery against another employee, Marin Hale. This act was accompanied by a verbal threat intended to intimidate that employee and manipulate the governance of this board. That is a workplace violence matter, a termination-level offense. He looked at the directors. Under our bylaws, we have no choice. We must move to an immediate vote for the suspension of Sloan Hale, pending a full, independent forensic audit and criminal investigation. Sloan crumpled into her chair. No, Grant, no. My father was silent, his face in his hands. And at the head of the table, my grandfather, Victor Hale, who had not said a single word since 9:01 a.m., finally moved. He didn't speak. He just looked down the table at the wreckage. Then, slowly, deliberately, he began to tap his right index finger on the black granite. Tap, tap, tap. It was the only sound in the room, the sound of a gavel, waiting to fall. Tap, tap, tap. The sound was tiny, precise. My grandfather's index finger striking the black granite. In the ringing silence of the boardroom, it sounded like a judge's gavel. Sloan was breathing hard, her chest rising and falling under the cobalt blue dress. She looked at my father. Grant, this is insane. This is just a misunderstanding. Tell them. My father, Grant, looked up. His face was a wreck, his eyes red and pleading. He looked from Sloan to his father. Dad, please, maybe we can handle this. Internally, it was a mistake, a terrible mistake. She can pay it back. We can fix this. Tap. The finger stopped. Victor Hale looked at his son. It wasn't anger. It was something heavier. It was the cold, dense weight of disappointment. No, Grant, Victor said. His voice was quiet, but it had the density of iron. We will not handle this. This is not a spilled drink. This is a rot. A rot you invited into our house, into my company. But the scandal, Dad, the family? The company, Victor snapped, and for the first time, his voice had a sharp, metallic edge. The company is the only thing in this room that matters. Not your feelings, not her feelings, the integrity of the name, Hale Transit. Sloan saw she had lost him. She turned her attack. A vote? She spat, her voice regaining its venom. You can't just vote me out. It's a family company. Grant holds shares. I am his wife. You don't have the power. She was looking at the independent directors now, Alvarez and Byrne, trying to find an ally. This is a family squabble. This is not a corporate matter. Ms. Alvarez, who ran a steel conglomerate in Ohio, leaned forward. Her voice was pure ice. Ms. Hale, you made it a corporate matter when you faked invoices. You made it a corporate matter when you billed this company for a dirt lot. You made it a corporate matter, she said, her eyes flicking to me. When you assaulted an employee to intimidate her before a board meeting, we will be voting. Sloan laughed, a high, panicked, ugly sound. You can't. You need the family block. You need the 51%, and Grant will never vote against me. Will you, darling? Will you? It's me. It's your wife. It was a checkmate. She knew it. My father looked like a man being drawn and quartered. He looked at Sloan, his face a mask of agony. He looked at his father. Dad, I can't. He couldn't. He was paralyzed, broken. He's right, Victor Hale said. The relief that flooded Sloan's face was instant. See? He can't. The vote is dead. He can't vote, Victor said, his voice flat. And he won't have to. My grandfather reached down to the worn, scuffed leather satchel at his feet, the same one he'd had on the porch at Grayford. He pulled out the thick, heavy manila envelope. He slid it into the center of the table. It landed with a soft, final, definitive thud. The label was stark. Hale Family Trust, Amendment. What is that? My father whispered. You all know the Hale Family Trust governs the 51% family block, Victor said, his eyes scanning the room. My shares, Grant's shares, and the estate shares. He pulled the document from the envelope. It was thick, bound in blue. This, he said, is Amendment 7B, an integrity clause. I had Arthur draw it up the day Grant called to tell me he was marrying Ms. Mercer. General Counsel Hayes stiffened. He knew exactly what this was. What does it do? Grant asked, his voice trembling. Victor Hale looked at every single person at the table. He was a judge, and the court was now his. Amendment 7B stipulates, he announced, his voice resonating with the absolute finality of case law, that in the event of proven material financial fraud or fiduciary malfeasance by an officer or family member, proven, which Miss Hale's actions and Marin's evidence have satisfied this morning. He paused. The room was a vacuum. The full 51% voting power of the Hale Family Trust is temporarily and unilaterally consolidated. Sloane's face was a blur of confusion. Consolidated? With who? You? You can't just... No, Victor said. Not with me. The trust is clear. The power transfers to a designated protector, a successor, named in the document, tasked with preserving the integrity of the company from any internal threat. But Grant is the successor, Sloane shrieked. My grandfather turned his head. His slate-gray eyes traveled the length of the granite table. They passed his son. They passed the directors. And they landed on me. Not anymore, Victor said. He looked right at me. Today, the protector is Marin. The world stopped. No! My father exploded. He shot out of his chair, his face a dark, apoplectic purple. Dad, you can't. You cannot do that. She's a child. This is my company, my birthright. It was never your birthright, Grant, Victor said, his voice terrifyingly calm. It was your responsibility, and you failed to protect it. It's not legal, Grant was yelling now, stabbing a finger at Hayes. Arthur, tell him. He can't just steal my shares. Tell him. Sloane was on her feet, too, grabbing Grant's arm. He's right. This is coercion. This is elder abuse. It's illegal. We'll sue. Arthur Hayes, the general counsel, did not look at them. He looked at the document. He looked at Victor. He looked at me. He cleared his throat. The sound was like dry leaves scraping pavement. Mr. Hale, he said, his voice flat. I've reviewed the trust. As you know, Amendment 7B is ironclad. The terms for activation, proven material fraud, have been met. The transfer of proxy is automatic and non-negotiable. He looked at my father, his eyes pitiless. Grant, the trust allows this. Your father's proxy is absolute in this matter. My father didn't sit. He just collapsed. He deflated, leaning on the back of his chair, one hand over his mouth. He stared at his father. The look on his face was one of pure, childlike betrayal. Victor Hale picked up his pen, a heavy, black, old-fashioned fountain pen. He uncapped it. This document, he said to the board, required activation. It required my signature upon presentation of the trigger. Marin, you have presented the trigger. He signed his name on the last page. Victor R. Hale. The nib of the pen was sharp. It made a faint, scratching sound, a single, deliberate stroke of black ink. It was the sound of a railroad switch being thrown, the sound of a new track being locked, permanently, into place. He pushed the document to Hayes. Arthur? Hayes took the pen. He signed his name as witness. It was done. My grandfather capped his pen. He placed it back in his pocket. He had given the weapon away. He looked at me. His face was unreadable. Marin, you now hold the 51% family block. The vote for suspension is on the table. Call it. I stood. My legs were solid. The throb in my cheek, which had been a low fire all morning, was gone. I felt nothing but a cold, clear, Arctic focus. "The motion is on the floor," I said. My voice was steady. It didn't waver. "A vote for the immediate, indefinite suspension of Sloan Hale from all duties, pending a full forensic audit and criminal investigation." Sloan stared at me. Her face was no longer angry. It was naked. It was the face of a chess player who had just realized, 5 moves too late, that the game was already over. "A vote to bar her from all company property, effective immediately," I continued. "A vote to authorize General Counsel to pursue all legal remedies against Riverlight Partners, Mercer Fleet Care, and Sloan Mercer, personally, for the recovery of all misappropriated funds." I looked around the table. "All in favor?" My hand went up. CFO Dalton's hand went up. General Counsel Hayes's hand went up. Ms. Alvarez's hand went up. Mr. Burns' hand went up. 5 hands. Sloan was staring at my father. Grant, do something." My father was the only one. His hands were flat on the table. He was staring at them. He didn't move. He didn't vote. "The motion passes," I said. 5-0, with 1 abstention. The vote is recorded. My grandfather nodded. Once, he reached for the heavy black phone on the credenza behind him. He pressed a single button. "Security," he said into the receiver. "Jim Corby, to the main boardroom, now." He didn't hang up. He just placed the receiver back on the cradle. Sloan looked at the door. She looked at me. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. The script was gone. The optimization, the synergy, the 14% savings. It all evaporated. We waited. 10 seconds. 15. The only sound was the distant, rumbling bass note of a truck coupling a trailer in the yard below. A quiet professional knock. "Come in," Victor said. The door opened. It wasn't a uniformed guard. It was Jim Corby, our head of security. He was a tall, quiet ex-cop who saw everything and said nothing. He had 2 of his plainclothed team members with him. They didn't enter the room. They just stood at the threshold, patient. They were professionals. They weren't there to make a scene. They were there to end one. "Jim," Victor said, his voice calm. "Sloan Hale has been suspended from all duties, effective immediately. Her access is revoked. She is to be escorted from the building. You will have her personal items from her office collected and messengered to her home. She is not to re-enter this property." Corby just nodded. He looked at Sloan. "Ma'am?" His voice was quiet, polite. Sloan stood up. The movement was stiff, mechanical, a marionette whose strings had been cut. She looked at my father one last time. "Grant?" It was a whisper, a question, a last, desperate plea for him to be the man she had married, the man she could control. My father finally looked at her. His face was a ruin of grief and shame. He said nothing. He just looked away. That was the final blow. Sloane's face changed. The mask didn't just crack. It liquefied. The bright, confident, cobalt blue PR smile. The sharp, intelligent gaze. The calculated warmth. It all just melted off her face. It dripped away like wet paint. What was left was small and ugly and terrified. She picked up her iPad from the table. She turned, without looking at any of us again, and walked toward the door. She walked past Jim Corby and his men, into the hall. One of them fell in behind her, one in front. The heavy boardroom door closed with a soft, hydraulic hiss. She was gone. The door hissed shut. A soft, final punctuation. Sloan was gone. The silence she left behind in the boardroom was louder than the argument. It was a dense, heavy vacuum, pulling all the air out of the room. The only sound was my father. He was still slumped against his chair, but the sound was not a word. It was a low, animal noise, a dry, ragged sob, torn from his chest. "Grant?" My grandfather's voice was not soft, but it was not cruel. It was the voice of a man stating a fact. "Get up." You destroyed her," my father whispered, not looking at anyone. He was staring at the black, polished granite. "You destroyed us." "No," Victor said. He stood, his old joints cracking faintly in the silence. "She destroyed herself, and you held the match." He looked at the remaining directors. "Dalton, Hayes, Ms. Alvarez, Mr. Barn, thank you. Dalton, you will work with Mr. Hayes to engage the independent auditors. I want a preliminary report by Wednesday. This meeting is adjourned." He didn't look at my father again. He walked, slowly and deliberately, out of the boardroom, not toward the main office, but toward his private, adjoining study. The directors gathered their papers, their faces grim. They filed out, murmuring quiet "excuse me's" to my father, who didn't move. They were professionals, escaping the wreckage of a family that had just cannibalized itself in front of them. I was alone with my father. He was weeping, his shoulders shaking. "How could you, Marin? Your own family?" I picked up my leather satchel. I slid the remaining black binders into it, along with the now signed trust amendment. I felt the cold, hard rectangle of the recorder in my pocket. I felt the throb in my cheek, which was now a dull, persistent ache. "She hit me. Dad," I said it quietly, not as an accusation, as a final, simple data point. It's not, he stammered. You don't ruin someone for a family spat." "It wasn't a spat," I said, my voice as cold and clear as the light in the room. "It was a business transaction. She stole, she threatened, she assaulted, and she was fired." I zipped the satchel. "She just didn't know it until today." "I loved her," he whispered. "I know," I said. "And she used that. She used you. She used your name. And she tried to use this company as her personal bank. The love was the leverage." I walked toward the door. "Marin," he was begging now. Don't let this be how it is. We can still." "No, we can't." I stopped at the door. "You have to decide. Dad, are you a Hale, or are you just her husband?" I didn't wait for the answer. I pulled the heavy glass door open and stepped out. It was 10:12 a.m. The executive floor, usually a low hum of activity, was dead silent. It was an open-plan office, a sea of low, gray partitions. Every head was up, from accounting, from operations, from marketing, dozens of eyes. They weren't looking at me. They were looking past me, toward the elevator bank. The company intranet, the internal message system, was buzzing. I could see the pop-ups on screens that had been left unattended. Sloan? Security? What's happening? They had seen Jim Corby and his men arrive. They had seen them enter the boardroom, and now they were all waiting, in a state of suspended, terrified silence, to see what came out. I saw the crowd was parted around the main elevator bank. Standing there, waiting, was Janelle Reed, the head of HR. She was holding a single, plain white envelope. She wasn't alone. Another plainclothes security guard, one I recognized from the night shift, was standing with her. They were the receiving party. The boardroom door opened again. My father stumbled out, his tie askew, his face a ruin. "Marin, wait, gah." And then, the second door opened, the private hallway door. Jim Corby emerged, walking calmly. Behind him was Sloan. This was the public fall. In the boardroom, she was a cornered animal, out here, under the fluorescent lights and the weight of 24 staring employees. She was something else. She was trying to regain her mask. Her spine was straight, her head was high, but her eyes were frantic, and her skin was the color of ash. She saw me. She saw Janelle with the envelope, and she saw my father, standing between us, frozen in his own pathetic indecision. It was her last, desperate gamble. She lunged toward him, her voice a theatrical, tearing whisper, loud enough for the first few rows of desks to hear. "Grant, darling, I did it for us, for the company, to make it strong." My father just stared at her, mute. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. The silence in the office was so total. My words cut right through it. "The company isn't your wallet, Sloan." She flinched. Her head snapped toward me. The hatred in her eyes was pure, undiluted. "And family," a new voice rumbled, "is not a shield." My grandfather. He had emerged from his study. He was standing by the boardroom door, his hands clasped behind his back. He was the founder, the patriarch, the final judge. He had come out to watch the sentence be carried out. Sloan was trapped, me in front of her, my grandfather behind her, my father, a broken statue, beside her, and Janelle Reed, the administrator of the execution, stepped forward. "Sloan," Janelle said, her voice devoid of all emotion. She held out the envelope. "This is a notice of your immediate, indefinite suspension, pending investigation. It includes a temporary restraining order, barring you from all Hale Transit properties and from contacting any Hale Transit employees. Your access has been revoked. An independent firm will contact you to schedule a formal, external interview." Sloan looked at the envelope as if it were a snake. She didn't take it. "Please take it, ma'am," Jim Corby said, his voice polite. Slowly, her hand shaking. Sloan took the envelope. It was the physical, paper proof of her end. "This way, ma'am," Corby said, gesturing not to the executive elevator we all used, but to the service elevator at the end of the hall, the freight elevator, the one they used to move broken furniture. She was being taken out like trash. She looked at my father, one last time. Her face was no longer pleading. It was empty. He had failed her. He had failed himself. She turned. The click of her high heels on the polished concrete floor was the only sound. Click, click, click. It was a sharp, lonely, retreating sound. It was the sound of power, evaporating with every step. Jim Corby and his team formed a small, polite, unbreachable perimeter around her. They moved past the desks, past the staring faces. The door to the service elevator lobby closed. She was gone. A long-held breath was released from the entire office. Someone coughed. A phone, left unanswered, began to ring. A shrill, piercing sound in the quiet. I turned. I was now at the head of the room. All the eyes were on me. The 51% holder. The girl who had, in the space of an hour, staged a full-blown corporate coup. I looked at the sea of faces. They were scared. They were confused. They were electric with gossip. They needed a leader. "This morning," I said, my voice carrying over the partitions, "we identified and removed a source of conflict and fraud. We are cleaning up. We are moving forward. Now, please, get back to work." It was blunt. It was cold. It wasn't inspiring. It was work. For a second, nobody moved. Then, a single analyst in the front row, a woman I'd worked with on the night shift in dispatch, turned. She looked at me, gave a single, sharp nod, and turned back to her screen. Her fingers began to fly across the keyboard. One by one, like a switch being thrown, heads turned, the sound of keyboards, the murmur of phone calls, the rustle of paper, the sound of the company, our company, came back to life. I walked toward the main elevators. My father was gone. He must have slunk back into the boardroom. My grandfather was gone, back into his study. I stepped into the elevator, alone, the doors closed. I rode it down to the ground floor, the main lobby. It was bright, full of glass, with a 2-story atrium and a massive, suspended aluminum sculpture of the Hale Transit logo. As I walked across the terrazzo floor toward the main exit, a sound made me pause. From the reception desk, a young woman I didn't recognize, one of the new receptionists, was watching me. She caught my eye, and she clapped. It was a single, solitary sound in the vast, echoing lobby. Clap. Then, embarrassed, she ducked her head and went back to her console. I pushed open the heavy glass door and stepped out into the noise of the yard. The sun was bright, and the air smelled like diesel and cold pavement. I wasn't smiling, but I was breathing. I didn't leave the building. I walked out of the lobby and straight into the West Wing, where the real work was done. Operations, dispatch, analytics, My world. The news had already traveled down. It had moved faster than the service elevator. The atmosphere was electric. People were clustered by the coffee machines, whispering. When I walked through the door, the whispering stopped. They just stared. I was no longer Marin from analytics. I was the 51% holder. I was the one who had just ejected the new wife. I ignored the stares. I walked to my office, the small windowless room between HR and accounting. I sat down at my desk, the one with the dual monitors and the stacks of freight ledgers. I looked at the black linen binder that held the signed trust amendment. Power. Power wasn't yelling in a boardroom. Power wasn't a slap in the kitchen. Power was the quiet, immediate, systematic execution of a plan, the aftershock. I picked up my phone. The clock read 10:47 a.m. The cleanup began now. My first call was to Arthur Hayes, the general counsel, who was already back in his office. "Arthur, it's Marin." "Ms. Hale," he said. His voice was all business. The family drama was over. This was legal procedure. "Arthur, I want preliminary injunctions filed against both LLCs, Riverlight Partners and Mercer Fleet Care. I want their accounts frozen by noon. I want the injunctions filed on the basis of fraud and recovery of misappropriated corporate funds. I also want data preservation letters sent to Sloan, personally, to Kyle Jensen, and to the bank that holds the LLC accounts. I want every text, every email, every server log. Nothing gets deleted." "Already in motion," Hayes said. His voice was dry. "I drafted the petitions based on your dossier last week, contingent on the board's vote. My associate is at the courthouse right now. The accounts will be frozen before Sloan's car is out of the county." "Good," I said. "Thank you. Arthur," I hung up. My second call was to CFO Robert Dalton. "Robert, it's Marin." "Marin?" he grunted. He sounded relieved. "A hell of a mess. A clean mess, but a mess. The vendors, Robert, Mercer Fleet Care, I want them red flagged and locked out of the payment system. Now, I want our third-party auditors, KPM, on site by end of day. I don't want an internal review. I want a full, independent, forensic audit of the marketing budget and all new vendor contracts from the last 6 months." "Done," Dalton said. "I've already suspended Kyle Jensen's corporate card and locked Mercer Fleet Care out of the vendor portal. The auditors are on their way. They're looking forward to it. They love this stuff." "Good," I said. I hung up. My third call was to Janelle Reed, in HR. "Janelle? Marin, the escort was successful. Ms. Hale is off the property." "Thank you. Janelle, I need you to do 2 things. First, Kyle Jensen, brand strategy associate. I want him suspended, pending investigation. Revoke his access, card key, email, VPN, everything. Effective immediately. I want his laptop and phone collected by security, now." "Understood," Janelle said. "Second, the drivers, trucks 14, 22, and 51. Their names are on the Ghost Run manifests. I'm willing to bet they were paid a bonus, in cash, by Sloan or Jensen, to run those routes and keep quiet. I don't want to fire them. I want to talk to them. They're witnesses. Offer them amnesty in exchange for a full, written statement on who paid them, when, and how." "That's smart," Janelle said. "It flips them. I'll have security meet Jensen at his desk. He's still there." "Good," I said. I hung up. My fourth call was internal, to the head of dispatch. "Mike, it's Marin Hale." "Marin? Ms. Hale. Jesus, I'm hearing stories." "Mike, they're probably true. I'm retasking. I'm killing the ghost runs. Effective immediately. I want trucks 14, 22, and 51 pulled from service. Full maintenance bay inspection. I want a complete diagnostic. Sloan's Fleet Care vendor was a sham. I need to know if those trucks are even safe to have on the road." "You got it. We'll pull 'em." "One more thing. Mike, I pulled up my own analytics dashboard. I'm looking at the logs for the drivers who were forced onto those Friday night runs. They were coerced, and they were underpaid for the risk. I'm authorizing a one-time integrity bonus for those 3 drivers, And I'm signing an executive order for a 5% wage increase for all night shift drivers, effective next pay cycle. The night shift is the backbone. We're going to start acting like it." There was a stunned silence on the line. "Marin? Ms. Hale? That's... Yes. Yes, ma'am. I'll let them know." "Good," I said. I hung up. I sat back. The legal attack was launched. The financial audit was in motion. The internal conspirators were locked out. The loyal employees were protected and rewarded. Less than 30 minutes. This was power. Not a scream. Just a series of quiet, efficient, irreversible clicks. The door to my office, which had no window, was suddenly blocked. A large shadow fell across my desk. It was my grandfather. He didn't come in. He just stood in the doorway, his hands in his pockets. He looked at my small, cramped office, at the old maps on the wall, at the server rack humming in the corner. "Good," he said. It was his highest form of praise. "You're cutting out the rot. Fast. That's good." "It's what the data showed," I said, leaning back in my chair. "The board is gone," he said. "Your father is in his office. He's not well, but he's a Hale. He'll survive." I said nothing. "There is one more thing," Victor said. "The company, the employees, they just saw a public execution. They're terrified. They're gossiping. They're scared of you. A vacuum of information is more dangerous than bad news. You need to fill it." "What do you suggest?" 3:00, he said. "All company meeting. In the main depot. I'll send the email. But you will run it. You will stand in front of them. You will be the one holding the gavel. They need to see who is in charge. Marin, not the old man, not the broken man. You." He held my gaze. This was the final test. I had the power. Now I had to hold it. In public. 3:00, I agreed. He nodded. Once. Good. He turned to leave. Then paused. He looked back. Not at me, but at the wall, where an old, framed, black and white photo hung. It was of him, as a young man, standing by the very first Hale truck, a 1952 REO Speedwagon. "Your father," he said, his voice softer, "will be at the meeting. He'll be in the back. He needs to see this, too." He put one hand on the doorframe, a big, gnarled, powerful hand. "It's not a punishment, Marin. It's a boundary. He needs to see the new boundary. You're not his daughter today. You're the company." He left. I was alone again. The phone rang. It was the main line. I looked at the caller ID. Riverfall Gazette, the local paper. I picked it up. "Analytics. This is Marin Hale." "Ms. Hale? This is Ben Schiller from the Gazette. We're getting some strange tips. A major executive shakeup? Your stepmother, Sloane Hale, was just seen being escorted out by security. Can you comment?" I looked at the talking points I'd already been drafting in my head. "Mr. Schiller, thank you for calling. This is my official statement. You can quote me. This morning, the Hale Transit Board of Directors voted to remove Sloane Hale from all duties, effective immediately. This action was taken in response to an internal audit that discovered significant financial irregularities and conflicts of interest." "Irregularities? You mean fraud?" he pressed. "I mean financial irregularities and conflicts of interest," I repeated, my voice flat. "That is our comment. We are cooperating with a full, independent audit to ensure our company's integrity." "But the family, this is your stepmother." "This was not a family matter. Mr. Schiller," I said, cutting him off. "This was a corporate governance matter. Hale Transit has a zero-tolerance policy for breaches of fiduciary duty. We acted swiftly to protect the company and our employees. That's all I have for you." I hung up. I didn't slam it. I just placed it in the cradle. No emotion, no family, just operational integrity. My phone buzzed. A text. It was from Marcus Breyer, the trust's lawyer. "Just a CYA. Got your audio-video files. Clear cut. Given the context, workplace prior threats, self-defense, and internal reporting of a crime. The recording is 100% admissible and protected. You're clean. Good work. I deleted the message. I looked at the clock. 1:30 p.m. I stood up. I grabbed my blazer from the hook on the door. I walked out of my office, down the long industrial carpeted hallway of the West Wing. The walls were lined with photos, decades of them. The company picnic, 1978. The launch of the first refrigerated fleet, 1985. The groundbreaking for this building, 1999. I stopped at the 1952 photo of my grandfather, the REO Speedwagon. He was young, lean, hungry. He was standing on the running board, and the look in his eyes was the same one I saw in the boardroom today. Cold, clear, focused on the horizon. I looked at the people in the photos, the dispatchers, the drivers, the mechanics in grease-stained coveralls. This was the company. It wasn't my father's grief. It wasn't Sloane's greed. It wasn't even my victory. It was numbers, and it was people. I straightened my suit jacket. It was time to go talk to the people. It was 3 o'clock. The main depot was a different world. The executive floor was a sterile glass box of recycled air and polite silences. This was the heart. It was a cavern of concrete and steel, vast enough to hold 50 trucks. The air was cold and smelled of diesel, tire rubber, and the faint, dusty scent of cardboard. And it was silent. The entire company was here. Hundreds of people, gathered under the hazy yellow-orange glow of the high-pressure sodium lamps. Drivers stood in their heavy jackets, arms crossed, mechanics in dark blue, grease-stained overalls, wiping their hands on red rags, dispatchers, accountants, and HR reps, looking pale and out of place on the oil-stained floor. They were all silent. They were watching me. A makeshift stage had been set up on loading dock 4, just a simple lectern and a microphone. I walked toward it. The sound of my suit heels on the gritty concrete was the only noise in the massive, echoing space. Click, click, click. Every eye followed me. They were scared. They had heard the explosion from the top floor. They had seen the Queen Bee dragged out by security. Now they were waiting, trapped in this concrete box, to see if the executioner was done. I stepped up onto the loading dock. I stood at the lectern. I looked out at the sea of faces. I saw fear. I saw resentment. I saw a deep, primal curiosity. I leaned toward the microphone. My voice, amplified, boomed across the cavern. "My name is Marin Hale." The echo died. The silence that followed was absolute. "I'm not going to talk about rumors," I said, my voice steady, cold. "I'm going to talk about facts. This company, Hale Transit and Supply, has one job. We move cargo from where it is to where it needs to be. We are a company of logistics. We are a company of numbers. We are not a company of ghosts." A murmur rippled through the mechanics in the front row. They had seen the manifests. They knew. "This morning," I continued, "we identified and removed a source of financial—" I paused. "Irregularity. This was not a family matter. This was a corporate governance matter." I didn't say her name. I didn't have to. I would not mention the family. I would not mention the slap. This was not a confession. This was a press release. Effective immediately. We are ending all runs to non-existent locations. We don't drive trucks to empty fields. We don't burn fuel for imaginary clients. We don't pay invoices for ghost warehouses. Our business is the truth. From this moment on, every mile, every manifest, every invoice will be transparent, and it will be real. I looked at the drivers. I started my career on the night shift in dispatch. I know what you do. I know the runs you were assigned. I know you were asked to do things that didn't make sense. That stops. Your routes will be real. Your manifests will be accurate. The waste is over. I took a breath. This was the moment. Fear is a motivator. Greed is a motivator. But loyalty? That had to be earned. I have already authorized 2 actions. First, the drivers who were assigned to those routes will be compensated with an integrity bonus. Second, all night shift operators will receive a 5% wage increase, effective on the next pay cycle. The shock was visible. It was a physical jolt. The drivers stared, disbelieving. The accountants looked panicked. Dalton, standing near the back, just nodded. He knew. It was in the new budget. I had already reallocated Sloane's consulting fee to payroll. "This company is its numbers," I said, my voice rising. "But it is also its people. We will be a company that is honest. We will be a company that is efficient. And we will be a company that is fair." I looked out at them. The fear was gone. It had been replaced by a stunned, wary respect. This wasn't a purge. This was a correction. "That is all. Get back to work." I stepped down from the lectern. I didn't wait for applause. There was none. There was just a new, different kind of silence. The sound of a new reality setting in. As I walked away, the crowd parted for me. No one met my eye. But they moved. They made a path. I was almost to the door when I saw him. My grandfather, he wasn't in the front row. He was in the back, half hidden by a massive yellow steel girder, almost lost in the shadows. He was wearing his old, dark wool field coat. He looked small and ancient, and more powerful than anyone in the room. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't clapping. He was just watching me. His eyes were exactly the same as they were on the porch at Grayford, calm, assured, and sharp as a piece of freshly cut steel. It was the look of a founder who had just seen his life's work pass into the only hands he trusted, hands that were just as cold and steady as his own. He gave one single, fractional nod. Then he turned, a shadow detaching itself from the steel, and disappeared through a side door. He didn't need to say a word. I walked back toward the executive wing. As I moved, the sound of the depot came back to life behind me. It started slow, a murmur of voices, then the loud, insistent beep, beep, beep of a forklift being put into reverse. A pneumatic wrench screamed from the maintenance bay. The heartbeat. The company's pulse was back, steady and strong. I was in the hallway when my phone vibrated in my jacket pocket. I pulled it out. A text from a number I didn't recognize. "You will regret this. You haven't just lost a stepmother. You've lost your father. You will burn for this. Sloane." I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel fear. I felt nothing. It was just more data, a final, useless data point. I pressed and held the message. A menu appeared. Reply, delete, block, forward. I tapped forward. I typed Arthur Hayes. I hit send. I blocked the number. I put the phone back in my pocket. I walked into my small, windowless office. I closed the door, and the sound of the depot died. I was in my quiet, sterile box of numbers. I closed my laptop. The screen went dark, reflecting my face. The bruise on my cheek was a faint, ugly, yellowish-purple shadow under the fluorescent light. My wrist, where she had grabbed me, itched. I pulled back the cuff of my white shirt. 4 faint, pink crescent moons. The nail marks. They were already fading. They'd be gone by tomorrow. I reached into my jacket, my hand brushing the placket of my shirt. I unpinned the small, cold, rectangular device, the recorder. I placed it on my desk. It was so small, a tiny piece of metal and plastic. It looked like nothing. It was the truth. My grandfather's voice echoed in my head. From that cold night on the porch, the truth doesn't need to shout. No, it just needs to be recorded. I stood up, I put on my coat. I walked out of my office, down the hall, past the old black and white photos of the first Hale trucks. I walked through the main lobby. The receptionist who had clapped this morning was at her desk. She saw me. She gave me a small, professional smile and immediately looked back down at her work. Correct. I pushed open the heavy glass doors. The 4 p.m. Riverfall sun hit me. It was a low, weak, autumn light, but it was bright. It struck the massive, aluminum Hale Transit logo on the side of the building. It made the polished metal gleam, not like silver, but like tin, clean, functional, and cold. I walked to my car, my footsteps echoing in the near-empty lot. I remembered my grandfather's other words, The ones that started this. The warning. The test. Don't go into the kitchen empty-handed. I stopped. I looked back at the glass and steel building. My building. A small, cold smile touched my lips. The first one all day. I won't. Not ever again. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'm curious. Where in the world are you tuning in from? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on Marin's revenge and how it all played out. If you enjoyed this, please consider subscribing to the channel, liking this video, and supporting us by hitting that hype button so this story can be heard by even more people.